Ladies and gentlemen, words are not sounds that disappear into the air. They are forces that move, shape, and command life. Long before psychology tried to explain behavior, and long before motivation became a trend, spiritual teachers understood something far deeper. Whatever you consistently speak, you give direction to unseen power. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that the spoken word is not descriptive, it is creative. It does not merely express reality, it establishes it. Every word spoken with feeling and acceptance becomes a decree, and life responds without argument. Most people believe power lies in action alone. They work harder, push longer, and struggle more, yet remain confused as to why results resist them. What they miss is that action follows instruction, and instruction is issued through words. A person may labor all day, but if their speech constantly affirms limitation, doubt, or delay, they are giving life two opposite commands. Life does not choose which one to follow. It obeys the dominant one. The spoken word, especially when repeated, carries authority because it shapes expectation, and expectation is the mold into which experience is poured. Florence explained that words spoken casually are often more powerful than words spoken deliberately. This is because casual speech reveals true belief. A person may affirm abundance for 5 minutes, but then casually complain for hours. The law does not respond to effort, it responds to consistency. The subconscious mind does not analyze intention, it absorbs repetition. Whatever is said again and again, without resistance, becomes accepted as truth. Once accepted, it must express itself as experience. The power of the spoken word is not rooted in volume or emotion. It is rooted in assumption. A calm statement spoken as fact carries more authority than an emotional statement spoken as hope. Saying "I will be successful one day" sends a very different command than saying "success follows me naturally." One speaks from desire. The other speaks from identity. Florence emphasized that life mirrors identity, not wishes. When speech reflects who you assume yourself to be, the outer world reorganizes to match that assumption. Many people unknowingly block their own good through contradiction. They speak faith in one moment and fear in the next. They say they trust life, then speak worry as if it were truth. The law does not punish this, it simply responds. Mixed commands produce mixed results. This is why some people experience progress followed by collapse, opportunity followed by delay. Their words open the door, and then quietly close it again. The spoken word must be aligned to produce sustained movement. Florence taught that words spoken about others also carry power. When you speak lack over someone else, you are affirming lack as a law that exists. The subconscious does not distinguish direction. It accepts the idea itself. This is why criticism, gossip, and judgment often return as personal limitation. What you declare as real in the world becomes real in your world. To speak abundance for others is to declare abundance as the governing principle. The spoken word is especially powerful when paired with neutrality. Struggle weakens authority. Desperation implies absence. Calm speech implies possession. When someone speaks with urgency, they are unconsciously declaring that what they want is not present. When someone speaks calmly, they are declaring that it already is. The law responds to the state behind the words, not the words alone. Florence repeatedly emphasized that the feeling of certainty is the real command. Nighttime speech carries a different quality of power. As the conscious mind relaxes, the subconscious becomes receptive. Words spoken before sleep sink deeper because resistance is low. This is why a single sentence repeated nightly can change patterns that years of effort could not. The mind accepts what it hears in states of rest as instruction, not suggestion. Over time, this instruction becomes self-concept, and self-concept becomes experience. Silence also has a role in spoken word power. Florence warned against speaking too much about plans, goals, and desires. Words spoken to impress others lose their creative force. They become noise instead of command. The most powerful words are often spoken privately, quietly, without explanation. When speech is not diluted by doubt or external reaction, it remains concentrated. Life responds faster to concentrated commands. There is also power in what is not spoken. Complaints, even subtle ones, function as affirmations of resistance. Saying, "This always happens to me," or "money is hard to keep," may feel harmless, but these phrases act as laws once accepted. Florence taught that one should never speak of lack, delay, or difficulty as if it were permanent. Temporary conditions should never be given permanent language. Words should describe direction, not circumstance. The spoken word reshapes memory as well. When you reinterpret past events through new language, you change their emotional charge. Saying "everything worked against me" reinforces victimhood. Saying "everything prepared me" establishes strength. The past does not resist reinterpretation, it responds to meaning. When meaning changes, identity changes. When identity changes, future outcomes shift automatically. Florence often said that life is not responding to effort, it is responding to orders. Orders are issued through speech. Even internal speech counts. The conversations you repeat in your mind are spoken words to the subconscious. Silent speech is still speech. It carries the same authority as words spoken aloud. This is why awareness of inner dialogue is critical. You are always speaking something into existence, whether you realize it or not. Faith in Florence's teaching was not belief in possibility, but acceptance of inevitability. When words are spoken as inevitable, life rearranges quickly. When they are spoken as possibility, life hesitates. Saying things can improve is very different from saying things are improving now. One opens a door, the other walks through it. The law responds to certainty, not optimism. The power of the spoken word explains why people raised in the same environment experience completely different outcomes. One internalizes language of limitation, the other internalizes language of possibility. Over time, these internal scripts shape behavior, opportunity recognition, confidence, and response to setbacks. What appears as luck is often the long-term effect of internal speech patterns. Florence also taught that gratitude spoken aloud is one of the strongest commands. Gratitude implies receipt. You do not thank for what you doubt. You thank for what you accept. When gratitude becomes a spoken habit, it trains the mind to expect support rather than resistance. Expectation shapes perception, and perception shapes opportunity. The spoken word does not force outcomes, it allows them. It removes inner opposition. When opposition is gone, the natural flow of life moves unobstructed. This is why forcing rarely works. Forcing implies resistance. Calm speech implies alignment. Alignment is what life obeys. Many people wait for evidence before they change their speech. Florence taught the opposite. Change speech first, evidence follows. Reality is a mirror, not a leader. When the mirror changes, the reflection must change as well. Speaking differently is not pretending. It is selecting a different law to operate under. Even a single sentence, if repeated consistently, can override years of contradictory programming. The subconscious does not care about time, it cares about dominance. Whatever message dominates wins. This is why consistency matters more than variety. Repeating one aligned sentence daily is more powerful than speaking many scattered ones. The spoken word is always active. There is no neutral speech. Every word either aligns with expansion or reinforces limitation. Awareness of this truth brings responsibility, but it also brings freedom. When you understand that speech is a tool rather than a habit, you regain authorship over experience. Florence Scovel Shinn did not teach positive thinking. She taught lawful thinking. She did not teach hope. She taught command. The spoken word, when used consciously, becomes the steering wheel of life rather than commentary from the passenger seat. Once this is understood, silence becomes intentional, speech becomes deliberate, and life begins to respond with precision rather than randomness. When speech aligns with inner acceptance, struggle dissolves. When struggle dissolves, outcomes accelerate. The spoken word does not need force, volume, or persuasion. It needs agreement, and agreement begins the moment you decide that what you say is no longer reaction, but instruction. The divine law of attraction is not a technique you turn on and off. It is not something you activate when you want results and ignore when life feels heavy. It is a law in the same way gravity is a law. It operates continuously, impartially, and without emotion. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that this law does not respond to effort, desire, or desperation. It responds to agreement. Whatever the mind agrees with as true becomes the pattern life must follow. Most people misunderstand attraction because they believe it is about wanting. Wanting is actually proof of absence. The law does not move toward what is wanted. It moves toward what is assumed. Desire says, I don't have. Assumption says, this is how life works for me. Florence emphasized that life reflects expectation, not intention. You may intend wealth, peace, or success, but if your expectation is struggle, delay, or disappointment, that expectation becomes the dominant order. The word divine is critical here. This law is not personal. It does not reward or punish. It does not judge worthiness. It simply mirrors the inner state back as experience. This is why two people can take the same action and receive completely different results. One is aligned internally, the other is conflicted. The law answers alignment every time. Florence taught that the divine law of attraction operates through feeling more than thought. Thoughts come and go, but feelings linger. Feeling is sustained belief. When a person feels supported by life, opportunities appear. When a person feels life is against them, obstacles multiply. This is not because life changes its nature, but because perception changes access. What you feel to be true determines what you notice, accept, and act upon. Many people unknowingly repel what they want through inner contradiction. They say they believe in abundance, yet emotionally rehearse fear. They speak optimism, yet feel tension. The law cannot respond to words that are not supported by feeling. Florence explained that emotion is the seal on the decree. Words without feeling are weak. Feeling without words is unfocused. When both align, reality has no resistance. The divine law of attraction does not require belief in its mechanics. It operates regardless of awareness. This is why people who deny manifestation still manifest constantly. They manifest the patterns they expect. Doubt does not stop the law. Doubt is simply another instruction. When someone expects disappointment, the law delivers it faithfully. When someone expects support, support appears. Florence warned against emotional extremes. Intense excitement followed by fear cancels momentum. Calm expectancy sustains it. The law responds best to neutrality, because neutrality implies confidence. When something is truly expected, there is no emotional charge. You do not get excited about what you assume will happen. You simply allow it. This is why some people seem lucky. They are not emotionally attached to outcomes. They assume favorable results as normal. Time is another misunderstood element. The law does not operate on human urgency. It operates on internal readiness. When resistance dissolves, results can appear instantly. When resistance remains, time stretches. People often say manifestation takes time. But what actually takes time is the release of contradiction. Florence taught that delay is not denial, it is feedback. It shows where belief and expectation are misaligned. The divine law of attraction also responds strongly to identity. What you believe about who you are determines what feels natural to receive. If wealth feels foreign to your identity, it will feel unstable even if it arrives. If success feels natural, it will feel inevitable even before it appears. This is why affirmations that focus on identity are more powerful than those that focus on objects. Saying I am supported by life creates more movement than saying I want money. Florence emphasized that the law is cooperative, not forceful. You do not command it through willpower. You cooperate with it through alignment. Struggle signals resistance. Ease signals agreement. When something feels heavy, it usually means the mind is arguing with reality instead of agreeing with a new pattern. Agreement does not mean resignation. It means choosing a new assumption. Gratitude plays a unique role in this law because gratitude assumes completion. You do not thank for what you doubt. You thank for what you accept. Spoken gratitude trains the subconscious to expect positive outcomes. Expectation shapes behavior subtly. It changes tone of voice, body language, timing, and decision-making. These small shifts create large external changes that appear coincidental, but are actually lawful. Florence also taught that fear is not the opposite of faith. Fear is faith in an unwanted outcome. The law does not distinguish between positive and negative focus. It responds to intensity and repetition. What is emotionally rehearsed becomes familiar. What becomes familiar feels normal. What feels normal becomes reality. This is why guarding inner dialogue is essential. The law is always listening. Another key misunderstanding is effort. Effort does not impress the law. Alignment does. Hard work without alignment leads to exhaustion. Alignment without excessive effort leads to flow. Florence was clear that inspired action arises naturally once the inner state shifts. You do not chase opportunity. You recognize it. You do not force timing. You meet it. This is why aligned action feels simple and misaligned action feels heavy. The divine law of attraction is precise. It does not bring what you vaguely want. It brings what you consistently accept. This is why casual statements matter. Saying things never work out for me may feel harmless, but it becomes a governing principle once accepted. The law does not argue. It obeys. Awareness of this creates responsibility, but also empowerment. Florence taught that silence is sometimes more powerful than speech. When the mind stops repeating old stories, space opens for new patterns. Silence is not emptiness, it is reset. In silence, the subconscious relaxes. In relaxation, new assumptions can take root. This is why periods of quiet reflection often precede breakthroughs. The law also responds to self-concept in relationships. If you assume people are supportive, you encounter support. If you assume people disappoint, disappointment repeats. This is not because others change, but because perception filters experience. The law arranges encounters that confer internal beliefs. Confirmation reinforces belief. This loop continues until belief changes. Florence emphasized that imagination is a preview, not fantasy. What you allow yourself to imagine comfortably becomes acceptable to the subconscious. Acceptability precedes manifestation. If something feels unrealistic, the law cannot move because the mind rejects it. Gradual expansion of imagination allows larger outcomes to feel normal rather than shocking. The divine law of attraction is always neutral, always active, always exact. It does not care about fairness, morality, or effort. It reflects inner agreement. Once this is understood, blame dissolves and responsibility emerges. Responsibility is not guilt, it is authorship. You are not responsible for everything that happens, but you are responsible for what you continue to accept as true. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that life is not testing you, it is responding to you. When response changes, experience changes. The law does not ask permission. It waits for instruction. Instruction is given through belief, feeling, and expectation. When these align, life moves with precision. Understanding this law removes the need to convince, chase, or struggle. It shifts focus inward, where control actually exists. When inner agreement changes, outer reality must follow. The law does not fail. It cannot fail. It only reflects. Assumptive faith is not belief built on hope. It is belief built on acceptance. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that faith is not something you struggle to feel, it is something you quietly assume. The moment something is assumed as true, the mind stops arguing and life begins arranging. This is why assumptive faith works even when emotions fluctuate. It does not depend on excitement, confidence, or constant reassurance. It depends on inner agreement. Most people think faith means believing something will happen. That belief still places the outcome in the future. Assumptive faith places it in the present as a settled fact. There is a subtle but powerful difference between "this will work" and "this works for me." One waits, the other rests. Florence emphasized that rest is the signal of faith. When the mind rests, resistance dissolves. When resistance dissolves, movement begins. Assumptive faith does not deny circumstances. It simply refuses to let them define reality. Circumstances are temporary expressions of old assumptions. To react emotionally to them is to reinforce them. Florence taught that when you assume a new truth internally, the outer situation has no choice but to reorganize, even if it appears unchanged for a time. The law is not slow, the mind is layered. Old assumptions must lose dominance before new ones fully express. This type of faith feels quiet. It does not announce itself. It does not argue with others. It does not try to convince. It simply knows. Knowing removes urgency. Urgency implies doubt. Calm implies certainty. When something is assumed, you do not obsess over it. You do not check constantly. You do not seek signs. You live as though it is settled. This internal posture is what moves the unseen forces Florence spoke of. Assumptive faith works because the subconscious mind operates on acceptance, not logic. It does not ask whether something is reasonable or realistic. It only asks whether it is familiar. Repetition creates familiarity. Familiarity creates acceptance. Acceptance becomes reality. This is why repeating a calm assumption daily is more powerful than intense affirmations spoken occasionally. Intensity fades, familiarity remains. Florence warned that effort often cancels faith. Trying to believe signals that belief is not yet present. Assumptive faith does not try. It selects. You do not try to believe gravity works. You assume it does. That assumption governs behavior effortlessly. In the same way, when you assume support, abundance, or guidance, your behavior naturally aligns without force. You make different choices, notice different opportunities, and respond differently to setbacks. One of the clearest signs of assumptive faith is emotional neutrality. When something is truly assumed, emotional charge drops. Excitement fades into expectation. Fear fades into patience. The mind stops rehearsing scenarios. Florence taught that this neutrality is not indifference. It is confidence. You do not emotionally react to what you already accept. This is why neutrality is a powerful indicator that faith has shifted from hope to assumption. Assumptive faith also explains why some people receive results without visualization, rituals, or complex techniques. They simply expect life to work for them. That expectation becomes their baseline. Life reflects baselines, not moments of intensity. If struggle is the baseline, struggle repeats. If ease is the baseline, ease becomes common. Florence taught that what feels normal is what manifests consistently. Language plays a critical role in this process. Assumptive faith speaks in the present tense without drama. It avoids exaggerated claims and avoids minimizing statements. It speaks simply. Things always work out for me. I am supported. I am guided. These statements are not affirmations to force belief. They are reminders of assumed identity. Identity is the deepest level of belief. When identity shifts, outcomes follow naturally. Many people block assumptive faith by constantly checking for evidence. Evidence seeking implies doubt. Florence taught that faith precedes evidence, not the other way around. When evidence is demanded first, the mind stays in a loop of waiting. Waiting reinforces absence. Absence reinforces doubt. Assumptive faith ends the loop by deciding internally before the outer world responds. Another obstacle is comparison. When you compare your progress to others, you shift attention outward. Outward focus weakens inner agreement. Florence emphasized that faith is personal. The law responds to your internal state, not to timelines or outcomes observed in others. Comparing delays alignment because it replaces assumption with evaluation. Assumptive faith also requires letting go of how things should happen. When the mind insists on a specific path, it limits movement. Florence taught that the law works through channels unseen by the conscious mind. When faith is assumed, guidance appears naturally. You feel drawn to certain actions without knowing why. These actions feel simple, even obvious in hindsight. This is alignment expressing itself as intuition. Fear often arises when assumptive faith begins to take root. This is not failure, it is old assumptions surfacing. The subconscious releases what no longer fits. Florence taught that fear is not a sign to stop. It is a sign that the mind is reorganizing. Responding to fear with calm assumption instead of reaction allows the transition to complete. Assumptive faith does not mean passivity. Action still occurs, but it is inspired rather than forced. There is a difference between effort and movement. Effort feels heavy. Movement feels natural. When faith is assumed, action flows without resistance. You do not push yourself, you follow momentum. This is why aligned action often feels smaller but produces greater results. Time behaves differently under assumptive faith. When resistance drops, outcomes can appear suddenly. What looked delayed resolves quickly once inner agreement is complete. Florence taught that miracles are not violations of law, they are the result of alignment reaching a tipping point. Once enough inner resistance dissolves, expression accelerates. Assumptive faith also changes how setbacks are perceived. Instead of seeing them as signs of failure, they are seen as adjustments. This perspective prevents emotional collapse. Emotional stability preserves alignment. Alignment preserves momentum. Momentum produces results. The cycle feeds itself when interpretation changes. Silence strengthens assumptive faith. When you stop explaining, justifying, or defending your belief, it remains undisturbed. Speaking too much invites contradiction. Contradiction weakens assumption. Florence advised keeping inner work private until results appear. This protects faith from external doubt and internal wavering. Assumptive faith is strengthened through consistency, not intensity. A small assumption held daily reshapes identity more effectively than dramatic declarations made sporadically. Identity determines what feels possible. What feels possible determines what is allowed. What is allowed manifests. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that faith is not something you build through effort. It is something you allow by releasing contradiction. The moment you stop arguing internally, faith is already present. The law does not require perfection. It requires agreement. Agreement is the bridge between thought and experience. When assumptive faith becomes habitual, life feels less hostile and more cooperative. Problems feel temporary. Solutions feel expected. Support feels normal. This does not mean challenges disappear, but they lose emotional weight. Without emotional weight, they dissolve faster. Assumptive faith is quiet confidence. It does not demand proof. It does not rush outcomes. It does not fear delay. It rests in the knowing that life responds to alignment, not effort. When this knowing becomes natural, the outer world begins to reflect it with precision. Money does not respond to need, effort, or urgency. It responds to consciousness. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that money is not a material force first, but a mental and spiritual one. It behaves like a mirror, reflecting the inner state of the one engaging with it. This is why two people can earn the same amount and experience completely different financial realities. One feels supported and secure, the other feels anxious and lacking. The difference is not income. It is consciousness. Consciousness is not what you think occasionally. It is what you assume consistently. It is the emotional and mental atmosphere you live in. Money flows easily to a consciousness that expects ease and withdraws from a consciousness that expects struggle. This happens automatically, without judgment. Money does not decide. It obeys. It follows the path of least resistance. And resistance is created internally. Many people believe money is attracted by hard work alone. Florence never denied the value of action, but she was clear that action without alignment produces exhaustion, not abundance. When consciousness is rooted in lack, effort increases but results diminish. When consciousness is rooted in sufficiency, even small actions yield disproportionate results. This is why some people seem lucky. They are not working under strain. They are operating from expectation. Money obeys consciousness because consciousness determines behavior at subtle levels. Tone of voice, confidence in conversation, timing of decisions, willingness to receive, and tolerance for success are all governed by inner state. A person who subconsciously expects loss will hesitate at critical moments, second-guess opportunities, and feel uncomfortable receiving large sums. A person who expects abundance will move naturally toward supportive conditions without force. Florence taught that money cannot stay where it is not welcomed internally. If someone receives money but feels guilt, fear, or unworthiness, the money will find a way to leave. It may go through unexpected expenses, poor decisions, or lost opportunities. This is not punishment, it is alignment. Money returns to where it feels accepted. Acceptance is a state of consciousness, not a moral quality. One of the most common blocks Florence addressed was the belief that money is difficult. This belief is rarely conscious. It is embedded in phrases learned early in life, repeated casually, and emotionally reinforced over time. Statements like, "Money doesn't come easy," or "You have to struggle to get ahead," shape expectation. Expectation becomes instruction. Instruction becomes experience. Money obeys that instruction faithfully. Another hidden block is over-attachment. Desperation repels money because desperation signals absence. When someone constantly worries about money, they are reinforcing the idea that it is scarce. The law does not correct this belief, it confirms it. Florence taught that calm expectation attracts more than intense desire. Calmness implies trust. Trust signals alignment. Alignment allows flow. Money also responds to identity. If someone identifies as someone who struggles financially, money will behave accordingly. Identity is the deepest form of consciousness. You do not need to consciously say, "I am poor," for identity to operate. It shows up in comfort levels, choices, and reactions. When money begins to increase, identity may push back through fear or self-sabotage. Until identity expands, money cannot remain. Florence emphasized that money is a servant, not a master. When people fear money, resent it, or idolize it, they place it above themselves. This inversion creates resistance. Money responds best when it is seen as a tool that naturally circulates. Respect without fear creates flow. Indifference without avoidance creates stability. Obsession creates instability. Consciousness also determines what opportunities are visible. Two people can walk past the same opportunity. One sees risk, the other sees possibility. The difference is not intelligence, it is expectation. Expectation filters perception. Perception guides action. Action produces outcome. Money arrives through channels already present, but only consciousness aligned with abundance recognizes them. Florence taught that money does not need to be chased, because chasing implies distance. What you chase runs, what you expect approaches. Expectation does not mean waiting passively. It means acting without emotional urgency. Actions taken from expectation feel different. They are confident, timely, and decisive. Actions taken from fear are rushed, inconsistent, and reactive. Another important aspect is gratitude. Gratitude shifts consciousness from lack to receipt. You cannot feel grateful and deprived at the same time. Spoken gratitude tells the subconscious that supply is present. This changes internal posture. When posture changes, money responds. Gratitude does not convince money to come, it signals that it already belongs. Florence also addressed generosity, not as sacrifice, but as affirmation. Giving from fear reinforces lack. Giving from trust reinforces abundance. The act itself is less important than the state behind it. Money obeys the state. When giving feels joyful and natural, it affirms sufficiency. When giving feels painful, it affirms scarcity. The law reflects whichever is dominant. Money consciousness is revealed most clearly in how someone speaks during difficulty. Do they panic or remain composed? Do they complain or expect resolution? Do they see obstacles or adjustments? These reactions are instructions. Money responds to composure because composure signals confidence. Confidence signals stability. Stability attracts flow. Florence warned against emotional attachment to outcomes. Wanting money to fix emotional wounds creates dependency. Dependency repels. Money does not exist to heal self-worth. When self-worth is stable, money becomes a natural extension rather than a substitute. Consciousness that is whole attracts money effortlessly because it does not demand validation from it. The subconscious mind plays a critical role here. It governs habits, reactions, and comfort zones. Money obeys the subconscious because behavior follows subconscious patterns. You can consciously desire wealth while subconsciously rejecting it. The subconscious always wins. This is why repetition of calm, aligned ideas is necessary. Over time, they replace old agreements. Florence taught that money responds quickly when inner conflict is resolved. Conflict creates friction. Friction slows movement. Resolution removes resistance. When you stop arguing internally about whether you deserve, whether it is safe, or whether it will last, money moves more freely. Safety is a powerful attractor. Money flows where it feels safe to stay. Even debt responds to consciousness. Viewing debt with fear magnifies it. Viewing it as temporary reduces emotional weight. Reduced emotional weight allows clear decision. Clear decisions lead to resolution. Florence never taught denial, but she taught authority. Authority comes from emotional steadiness, not panic. Money obeys consciousness in timing as well. When urgency dominates, timing feels delayed. When trust dominates, timing aligns. The law does not rush to meet desperation, but it responds quickly to readiness. Readiness is an inner state, not an external condition. Florence Scovel Shinn made it clear that prosperity is not something you force into existence. It is something you allow by becoming congruent with internally. Money does not test you, it reflects you. When consciousness shifts from struggle to support, from fear to trust, from effort to alignment, money adjusts automatically. This understanding removes blame and replaces it with responsibility. Responsibility is empowering. It means change is possible without changing the entire world. It means that by shifting inner agreement, outer flow changes. Money obeys consciousness because consciousness is the command center. Once this is seen, effort becomes lighter, outcomes become smoother, and abundance becomes less mysterious and more natural. The word is not just a sound you make. It is not merely language or communication. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that the word is a creative force, a command issued into the invisible, and once spoken with feeling and belief, it cannot return void. Every word spoken is a seed. It carries direction, intention, and expectation. Whether spoken casually or deliberately, it sets something in motion. This is why life often looks like a replay of what has been repeatedly spoken in the past. Most people underestimate their words because they believe power comes from action alone. But action is always preceded by speech, even if that speech is internal. Before something appears in the physical world, it is first named, agreed upon, and spoken internally or externally. The spoken word gives shape to thought. It tells the subconscious what to accept as truth. Once accepted, the subconscious works tirelessly to prove it correct. Florence emphasized that words spoken with emotion are especially powerful. Emotion energizes speech. It is the fuel that carries the word into manifestation. This is why angry words seem to produce immediate consequences, and fearful words often attract exactly what is feared. The law is not selective. It does not interpret intent. It responds to instruction. The word, once released, becomes law. Many people speak against themselves all day without realizing it. Statements like "I always struggle," "money never stays with me," or "nothing works out for me" may seem harmless, but repetition gives them authority. Repeated words form agreements. Agreements shape identity. Identity dictates experience. Over time, the spoken word becomes a lived reality, not because it was true initially, but because it was declared. Florence taught that the universe is not moved by hope, but by command. Hope implies uncertainty. Command implies authority. When someone speaks from authority, they are not asking life to cooperate. They are assuming cooperation. Assumption is a powerful state. It removes doubt from the equation. Doubt weakens words. Authority strengthens them. The word becomes law when it is spoken without contradiction. Many people cancel their own words moments after speaking them. They say something positive, then immediately follow it with worry, sarcasm, or fear. This sends mixed instruction. The subconscious does not know which to obey, so it defaults to the dominant emotional state. Usually that state is fear or habit. This is why consistency matters more than intensity. Florence often spoke about the importance of disciplined speech, not silence, but awareness. Every word should be treated as a decree. This does not mean suppressing emotion or pretending everything is perfect. It means choosing words that point toward resolution instead of reinforcing the problem. Saying, "This is working out in my favor" during difficulty is not denial, it is direction. The law of the word operates whether or not someone believes in it. Belief simply accelerates results. Unconscious use of the word still produces outcomes, but often unwanted ones. Conscious use allows alignment. Once someone understands that their words are creative, responsibility replaces blame. Life stops feeling random and starts feeling responsive. Florence also taught that spoken words carry identity. When someone says, "I am," whatever follows becomes a command. The subconscious accepts, "I am" statements as identity-level truth. Saying, "I am broke" is not a description, it is an instruction. Saying, "I am supported" is not wishful thinking, it is a declaration of alignment. Identity-based speech is especially powerful because it shapes long-term patterns. The word is law because it sets boundaries. It defines what is allowed and what is not. Someone who constantly says, "That is not for people like me," creates an invisible wall. Opportunities may appear, but they will not cross that boundary. Conversely, someone who speaks in terms of possibility creates openings. The external world rearranges itself to match the internal decree. Florence explained that words spoken before sleep are particularly influential. As the conscious mind relaxes, the subconscious becomes more receptive. Words spoken in this state bypass resistance. This is why nighttime affirmations, prayers, or declarations often produce faster results. The word enters deeper layers of belief and begins restructuring internal patterns. Another key aspect is tone. Words spoken playfully carry less authority than words spoken calmly and confidently. Calmness signals certainty. Certainty gives the word weight. Panic weakens words, because panic implies lack of control. Florence taught that the most powerful words are spoken without emotional strain. They are stated as facts, not pleas. Silence also plays a role. Silence after a declaration allows the word to settle. Over-explaining, justifying, or repeating from anxiety disrupts the process. Once the word is spoken, trust must follow. Trust is not passive. It is an inner posture of expectation. Expectation keeps the word alive without interference. Florence warned against idle speech. Gossip, complaint, and casual negativity may feel harmless, but they create background noise in the subconscious. This noise interferes with deliberate creation. A mind filled with contradictory words cannot produce clear outcomes. Clarity comes from alignment between speech, feeling, and expectation. The law of the word also explains why some affirmations fail. Repeating words that contradict deeply held beliefs creates internal resistance. The solution is not louder repetition, but gentler alignment. Florence suggested choosing words that feel believable and calm. A word that feels natural carries more power than one that feels forced. Words spoken about others also return. Speaking limitation over others reinforces limitation consciousness. Speaking possibility over others reinforces abundance consciousness. The law does not differentiate between self-directed and outward-directed speech. All words pass through the same subconscious filter. What you declare about life becomes your experience of life. Florence taught that prayer is simply aligned speech. It is not begging. It is agreement with a higher order. When prayer is spoken as a statement rather than a request, it carries authority. I give thanks that is more powerful than please give me, because gratitude assumes received. Assumption activates law. One of the most overlooked aspects of the word is timing. Words spoken during emotional peaks imprint deeply. This is why repeated arguments, emotional conversations, or dramatic statements often shape long-term outcomes. Being mindful during emotional intensity is crucial. Choosing words carefully in these moments prevents unwanted decrees. Florence believed that life listened constantly. Not selectively, not occasionally, but always. The word is always being recorded, accepted, and expressed. This is not meant to create fear, but awareness. Awareness brings freedom. Once someone realizes they are always issuing commands, they can choose better ones. The word is law because it establishes reality. Reality is not fixed. It is fluid, responsive, and obedient to consciousness expressed through speech. When speech changes, reality follows. Not instantly always, but inevitably. Delays are not denials, they are adjustments. This understanding shifts the focus from external struggle to internal alignment. Instead of asking why things are not working, one begins to listen to how they are speaking. Patterns become visible. Old agreements surface. With awareness, they can be replaced. Florence Scovel Shinn's greatest teaching was not about wealth, health, or success individually. It was about authority. Authority comes from knowing that your word matters, that life responds, that you are not a victim of circumstance, but a participant in creation. Once the word is treated as law, speech becomes intentional. Complaints turn into observations without emotional charge. Fearful statements are replaced with calm directives. Over time, life reorganizes itself around this new pattern of speech. The law does not require perfection. It requires consistency. Even small shifts in language produce noticeable changes. Replacing I can't with I'm learning how changes direction. Replacing nothing ever works with this is unfolding opens possibility. These are not just words. They are commands. When the word aligns with belief, feeling, and expectation, it becomes unstoppable. It moves through circumstances, influences decisions, and arranges events. It does not force, it attracts. It does not struggle, it organizes. Understanding that the word is law removes superstition from manifestation. It becomes practical. Speak differently, experience differently. Speak with authority, receive with ease. Speak from alignment, watch life respond. The world you live in is largely a spoken one. Not just by others, but by you. Once this is understood, speech becomes one of the most powerful tools available, not because it controls life, but because it cooperates with it. There are forces constantly operating beneath the surface of life that most people never consciously acknowledge, yet they shape outcomes with remarkable precision. Florence Scovel Shinn referred to these as invisible forces, not because they are mysterious or supernatural, but because they operate beyond the range of the physical senses. These forces respond to inner states, assumptions, emotional tones, and habitual expectations rather than visible effort alone. Most people attempt to change results by manipulating external conditions. They work harder, push more aggressively, or attempt to control circumstances. When this fails, frustration grows. Florence taught that frustration itself is evidence of misalignment with the invisible forces. These forces do not respond to pressure. They respond to harmony. When inner conditions are aligned, outer conditions rearrange without strain. Invisible forces are always neutral. They do not reward or punish. They organize. They respond to direction. Direction is provided by belief, feeling, and expectation acting together. When these are inconsistent, results appear inconsistent. When they are aligned, outcomes appear almost effortless. What looks like luck is often alignment that has been maintained long enough to become visible. One of the most misunderstood aspects of invisible forces is timing. People often believe that if something does not happen immediately, it is not working. Florence emphasized that invisible forces work behind the scenes before anything shows up externally. They rearrange people, opportunities, conversations, and circumstances in ways that cannot be seen in real time. Judging the process too early interrupts alignment. The invisible always precedes the visible. A decision is made internally before an action is taken. An opportunity is recognized internally before it is accepted externally. A breakthrough is felt internally before it appears materially. When people understand this sequence, they stop trying to force visibility and instead focus on maintaining internal congruence. Florence explained that anxiety disrupts invisible forces because anxiety introduces contradiction. It sends the message that something is wrong or missing. Invisible forces respond by organizing experiences that confirm that message. Calm expectation, on the other hand, signals readiness. Readiness allows movement. This is why calm confidence often produces faster results than intense desire. Invisible forces are also highly responsive to self-concept. How a person sees themselves determines what feels possible. If someone unconsciously identifies as someone who struggles, invisible forces will arrange circumstances that maintain that identity. If identity shifts to someone who expects support, the same forces arrange different circumstances. The external world reflects internal identity with precision. Florence taught that resistance is invisible but powerful. Resistance shows up as hesitation, doubt, overthinking, or fear of success. These are not personality flaws. They're internal signals that invisible forces respond to. When resistance is present, movement slows. When resistance dissolves, movement accelerates. The goal is not to eliminate fear completely, but to stop negotiating with it. Another critical aspect of invisible forces is emotional consistency. Brief moments of positivity do not outweigh long periods of doubt. The dominant emotional state carries the instruction. Invisible forces respond to what is habitual, not what is occasional. This is why consistency matters more than intensity. A calm, steady expectation is more powerful than bursts of enthusiasm followed by discouragement. Florence also spoke about the role of language in activating invisible forces. Words are not merely symbolic, they are directional. Spoken words shape expectation, and expectation directs invisible movement. When someone repeatedly speaks about obstacles, invisible forces arrange more obstacles. When someone speaks in terms of resolution, invisible forces begin organizing solutions. Invisible forces operate through people. This is often overlooked. Money, opportunities, and changes rarely appear from nowhere. They come through conversations, offers, ideas, or introductions. When alignment is present, the right people appear at the right time. When alignment is absent, people who reinforce limitation appear instead. This is not coincidence, it is organization. Florence taught that invisible forces respond to trust. Trust does not mean passive waiting, it means acting without inner tension. When actions are taken calmly, invisible forces cooperate. When actions are taken from panic, invisible forces withdraw. This is why rushed decisions often create complications, while patient decisions create clarity. The subconscious mind is the primary interface with invisible forces. It communicates through emotion and habit rather than logic. This is why logical arguments alone do not change outcomes. Invisible forces respond to what feels true, not what sounds reasonable. When emotional agreement changes, invisible organization follows. Florence emphasized that gratitude is one of the fastest ways to align with invisible forces. Gratitude signals completion rather than lack. It communicates that supply is present. Invisible forces respond by expanding what is acknowledged. Gratitude does not create something from nothing, it amplifies what is already in motion. Another overlooked principle is detachment. Attachment creates pressure. Pressure implies fear of loss. Invisible forces respond to fear by restricting flow. Detachment signals confidence. It communicates that the outcome is secure regardless of timing. This allows invisible forces to work efficiently without interference. Florence warned against constantly checking for results. This behavior introduces doubt. Doubt sends mixed signals. Invisible forces cannot organize efficiently when instructions keep changing. Once alignment is established, attention should shift away from the outcome and toward maintaining internal balance. Invisible forces also respond to moral clarity. Not in a judgmental sense, but in terms of internal coherence. When someone desires something that conflicts with their values, resistance forms. Invisible forces reflect this conflict by creating delays or obstacles. When desire and values align, movement becomes smooth. The idea that invisible forces are always listening can feel intimidating, but Florence presented it as empowering. It means nothing is random. It means change is always possible by adjusting internal conditions. External circumstances are not fixed. They are flexible reflections of inner agreement. Florence also taught that invisible forces are patient. They do not rush or pressure. They wait for alignment. When alignment is present, movement can be rapid. What appears as a sudden breakthrough is often the result of invisible organization that has been happening quietly for some time. Faith, in Florence's teaching, was not blind belief. It was inner knowing. Knowing removes struggle. When someone knows something is resolved internally, invisible forces begin final adjustments externally. This knowing cannot be forced. It emerges naturally when resistance dissolves. Invisible forces are also influenced by attention. Where attention goes, energy follows. When attention is constantly on problems, invisible forces organize more problems. When attention shifts to solutions, possibilities expand. This does end. Faith, as Florence Scovel Shinn taught it, is not belief born from desperation, nor is it hope disguised as optimism. Faith is inner certainty. It is the quiet, settled knowing that something is already arranged, even when there is no physical evidence yet. Prosperity flows through this kind of faith because faith removes resistance. Resistance is what blocks supply, not lack of opportunity. Most people misunderstand faith as something emotional or religious only. Florence reframed it as alignment with law. Faith is agreement with an unseen order that is already functioning. When someone has faith, they stop arguing with reality internally. They stop negotiating, doubting, or second-guessing. That inner stillness creates space for prosperity to move. Prosperity through faith does not mean sitting idle or waiting for miracles. It means acting without fear. Fear contaminates effort. Faith purifies it. Two people can take the same action. One succeeds, the other struggles. The difference is not intelligence or effort. It is faith. Faith produces clarity. Clarity produces effective action. Effective action produces results. Florence taught that faith begins where anxiety ends. Anxiety is constant questioning of outcomes. Faith is acceptance of outcomes before they appear. This acceptance changes behavior subtly but powerfully. A person operating from faith speaks differently, chooses differently, and reacts differently. These differences compound over time, creating vastly different financial realities. Faith also stabilizes emotion. Emotional instability creates financial instability because decisions are made from fluctuating states. Faith creates emotional consistency. Consistency creates trust within the subconscious. When the subconscious trusts the direction, it cooperates fully. Cooperation accelerates prosperity. One of the greatest blocks to prosperity is conditional faith. Conditional faith says, I'll believe it when I see it. The law does not respond to this. Florence was clear that faith must precede evidence. Evidence is the result, not the cause. Waiting for proof before believing keeps prosperity perpetually delayed. Prosperity through faith also requires releasing the idea that money must come through struggle. Struggle is not noble in the law. It is inefficient. Faith allows ease. Ease does not mean laziness. It means absence of inner friction. When inner friction dissolves, outer effort becomes lighter and more effective. Florence often pointed out that people who struggle financially are often deeply faithful in other areas of life but compartmentalize money. They trust life with health or relationships but not with finances. This split creates inconsistency. Prosperity requires unified faith. Faith must include money as part of the natural order, not something separate or suspicious. Faith changes how delays are interpreted. Without faith, delay feels like denial. With faith, delay feels like preparation. This interpretation matters because reaction feeds the subconscious. Panic reinforces lack. Calm expectation reinforces abundance. Prosperity follows the dominant interpretation. Another key aspect of faith is surrender, not as defeat, but as trust in timing. Florence taught that when someone stops forcing outcomes, they stop blocking better ones. Forcing implies mistrust. Mistrust disrupts flow. Faith allows outcomes to arrive through paths that logic could not predict. Prosperity through faith also means trusting oneself. Many people claim to trust life or God but do not trust their own intuition. Intuition is often the channel through which guidance arrives. Ignoring it creates misalignment. Faith strengthens intuition because it removes fear-based interference. Faith also governs how setbacks are handled. A person without faith sees setbacks as confirmation of failure. A person with faith sees them as redirection. Redirection keeps movement alive. Stagnation kills momentum. Prosperity requires movement, even if the path shifts. Florence emphasized that faith must be practiced daily, not occasionally. It is built through repeated inner agreements. Each time someone chooses trust over worry, faith strengthens. Each time someone speaks expectation instead of fear, faith deepens. Prosperity is the cumulative effect of these small, consistent choices. Faith also dissolves comparison. Comparison erodes prosperity because it shifts focus outward. Faith brings focus inward. When attention stays on alignment rather than competition, creativity increases. Creativity opens new channels of income and opportunity that comparison blinds people to. One of the most subtle forms of faith is patience. Patience is not passive waiting, it is active trust. It signals confidence in the process. Impatience signals doubt. Doubt slows manifestation. Florence taught that patience often shortens the timeline because it removes interference. Prosperity through faith also requires letting go of control over form. Many people decide exactly how money must come. This rigidity blocks better avenues. Faith allows flexibility. It trusts the outcome without micromanaging the method. When the method is not fixed, possibilities multiply. Faith also influences generosity. Generosity rooted in faith feels expansive, not draining. It affirms abundance. This affirmation is internal, not transactional. The law responds to the state, not the act. Generosity from fear reinforces scarcity. Generosity from faith reinforces supply. Florence made it clear that faith does not deny challenges. It denies their authority. Challenges exist, but they are not final. Faith places authority on principle rather than circumstance. When authority shifts, circumstances follow. Faith also quiets internal dialogue. Constant mental chatter creates confusion. Confusion blocks prosperity because decisions become reactive. Faith simplifies thinking. Simplicity creates decisiveness. Decisiveness creates momentum. Prosperity through faith is not about positive thinking alone. It is about emotional agreement. A person can think positive thoughts while feeling fearful. The law responds to feeling. Faith stabilizes feeling. Stable feeling produces stable results. Florence taught that faith grows through use. Each small success reinforces it. Each instance of trust that results in support strengthens belief. Over time, faith becomes natural rather than forced. Prosperity then becomes a byproduct rather than a pursuit. Faith also refrains effort. Effort from fear feels heavy. Effort from faith feels purposeful. Purpose energizes. Energy attracts opportunities. Opportunities create prosperity. Another overlooked aspect is faith in worthiness. Many people believe prosperity is possible in general, but not for them. This belief quietly undermines results. Faith must include self-worth. Without it, money may come briefly but will not stay. Florence emphasized gratitude as an expression of faith. Gratitude assumes receipt. It confirms trust. When gratitude becomes habitual, faith deepens automatically. Prosperity responds because the subconscious accepts abundance as normal. Faith also protects against discouragement. Discouragement interrupts flow. Faith maintains direction even when progress is invisible. Invisible progress is still progress. Understanding this prevents emotional withdrawal. Prosperity through faith is ultimately about relationship. It is a relationship with life, with oneself, and with supply. When the relationship is rooted in trust, prosperity flows naturally. When it is rooted in fear, prosperity struggles. Faith does not eliminate effort, but it eliminates struggle. It does not remove challenges, but it removes panic. It does not guarantee instant results, but it guarantees alignment. Alignment is what prosperity responds to. Florence Scovel Shinn's message was simple but profound. When faith becomes the foundation, prosperity becomes inevitable, not because faith forces life to comply, but because faith aligns consciousness with laws that are already operating there. The subconscious does not argue, analyze, or negotiate. It accepts whatever is impressed upon it repeatedly, emotionally, and consistently becomes an agreement. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that life unfolds according to subconscious agreement, not conscious desire. This is why people often experience results that contradict what they say they want. The subconscious is following older, deeper instructions. A subconscious agreement is not a single thought. It is a pattern. It forms through repetition, emotional charge, and authority figures during formative years. Once formed, it operates automatically. It decides what feels normal, what feels possible, and what feels safe. Money, success, relationships, and opportunity all pass through this filter. Anything that contradicts an existing agreement feels uncomfortable and is often rejected unconsciously. Many people consciously affirm abundance while subconsciously agreeing with struggle. They may repeat positive phrases, but their emotional reactions tell a different story. Anxiety around money, discomfort receiving help, guilt about success, or fear of visibility all indicate conflicting agreements. The subconscious responds to emotion, not words. When emotion contradicts affirmation, the agreement does not change. Florence explained that the subconscious mind is literal. It does not understand sarcasm, jokes, or exaggeration. When someone repeatedly says, "I can't afford that," or "I always mess things up," the subconscious accepts these statements as facts. Over time, it organizes behavior and perception to confirm them. This happens without conscious intent. Subconscious agreement also governs tolerance. Every person has a tolerance level for money, success, and ease. When life exceeds that tolerance, the subconscious intervenes. It may create distractions, poor decisions, or emotional discomfort to restore familiarity. This is why sudden financial gains often disappear. The agreement has not changed, so the system corrects itself. Florence taught that agreements are reinforced through identity. When someone identifies as not good with money or not lucky, this identity becomes a standing order. The subconscious protects identity above comfort. It would rather maintain consistency than allow unfamiliar success. This is not self-sabotage in a mortal sense. It is self-protection according to existing agreements. Changing subconscious agreement requires more than effort. It requires repetition without emotional resistance. New ideas must be introduced gently and consistently until they feel natural. Florence emphasized the importance of calm repetition. Calm signals safety. Safety allows acceptance. Force creates resistance. Resistance strengthens the old agreement. One of the most effective ways agreements form is through emotional repetition. A single emotionally intense experience can create a powerful agreement. For example, financial loss paired with fear can create a lifelong association between money and danger. The subconscious remembers the emotion, not the event. Future situations trigger the same response automatically. Florence taught that agreements are also formed through language patterns. Phrases repeated in childhood often become subconscious law. These phrases are rarely questioned because they feel familiar. Familiarity is mistaken for truth. Recognizing these inherited agreements is the first step toward changing them. The subconscious also learns through observation. Watching parents struggle, hearing constant worry, or observing instability creates silent agreements. Even without direct instruction, the subconscious absorbs patterns. These patterns later express themselves as adult reality. This is why awareness alone can be transformative. Once a pattern is seen, it loses unconscious authority. Subconscious agreement determines what opportunities are perceived. Two people can be offered the same opportunity. One sees possibility, the other sees risk. The difference is not intelligence. It is agreement. Agreements shape perception before logic is applied. Logic then justifies the perception after the fact. Florence emphasized that the subconscious cannot be argued with intellectually. Reason does not dissolve agreement. Experience does. New experiences, even small ones, begin to loosen old patterns. Each positive outcome slightly weakens the old agreement. Over time, consistency replaces conflict. Sleep plays a crucial role in subconscious agreement. During sleep, the conscious mind relaxes, and the subconscious becomes more receptive. This is why Florence encouraged speaking aligned words before sleep. Words spoken in this state bypass resistance and enter deeper layers of belief. Another powerful moment is emotional neutrality. When the mind is calm, new ideas can be accepted without triggering defense. This is why meditation, reflection, or quiet repetition works. Emotional intensity strengthens old agreements, unless the intensity is aligned with the new idea. Florence taught that imagination also shapes agreement. The subconscious does not distinguish between imagined and actual experiences. When something is vividly imagined with emotional involvement, the subconscious treats it as real. This is why imagining success calmly and consistently can change tolerance levels over time. Subconscious agreement also explains why some people feel uncomfortable when things go well. That discomfort is not intuition. It is misalignment with existing agreements. The discomfort is a signal that the identity has not caught up with the experience. When identity expands, discomfort fades. Another overlooked aspect is self-talk during failure. How someone interprets setbacks reinforces agreements. Interpreting failure as proof of inadequacy strengthens limitation. Interpreting it as feedback maintains possibility. The subconscious records interpretation, not outcome. Florence taught that gratitude is a powerful agreement shifter. Gratitude assumes receipt. It communicates to the subconscious that supply exists. This shifts focus from absence to presence. Over time, this changes internal posture. Money responds to posture, not pleading. Agreements also exist around effort. Many people subconsciously agree that success must be hard. Ease feels suspicious. When ease appears, they unconsciously complicate things. This agreement can be replaced by normalizing ease through small wins that do not trigger fear. Florence warned against rehearsing negative scenarios. Rehearsal creates familiarity. Familiarity becomes agreement. Agreement becomes expectation. Expectation becomes experience. The subconscious cannot tell the difference between preparation and instruction. Changing agreement does not require perfection. It requires persistence. Old agreements dissolve through lack of reinforcement. When old language, reactions, and emotional habits are no longer fed, they weaken. New agreements strengthen through repetition and calm acceptance. Another subtle agreement is worthiness. Many people agree subconsciously that they must earn rest, love, or abundance. This creates perpetual striving. Florence taught that worthiness is inherent. When this agreement shifts, effort becomes inspired rather than compulsive. The subconscious also responds to authority. Words spoken by someone perceived as authoritative imprint deeply. This is why self-authority is critical. Speaking to oneself with confidence carries more weight than pleading affirmation. Tone matters. Certainty imprints faster than desperation. Florence emphasized that subconscious agreement is always active, whether conscious or not. It is always shaping outcomes. The goal is not to control it aggressively, but to guide it gently. Guidance requires patience. Patience signals trust. Trust allows reorganization. As agreements shift, reality responds incrementally. Small changes appear first. Emotional reactions soften. Opportunities feel less threatening. Decisions become easier. These are signs that agreement is changing. External results follow internal stabilization. Subconscious agreement explains why manifestation feels inconsistent for many people. Conscious desire fluctuates, but agreement remains stable until intentionally addressed. Once agreement shifts, consistency emerges naturally. Florence's teachings were practical because they respected the subconscious rather than fighting it. She did not advocate denial or suppression. She advocated replacement. Old agreements are not removed, they are outgrown. When new agreements feel normal, life reflects them effortlessly. Money feels safer. Opportunities feel natural. Success feels deserved. At that point, manifestation is no longer a technique. It is a state. Understanding subconscious agreement removes self-blame. It reframes struggle as conditioning rather than failure. Conditioning can be changed. With awareness, repetition, and emotional alignment, agreements evolve. When agreement changes, reality follows without force. Not because life suddenly cooperates, but because it was always cooperating with the instructions it was given. Speech is not merely a reflection of reality, it is one of the primary tools through which reality is shaped. Florence Scovel Shinn emphasized that aligned speech creates reality because words spoke in harmony with belief, feeling, and expectation become instructions to life itself. Speech that is misaligned produces confusion. Speech that is aligned produces results. Most people speak habitually rather than deliberately. Their words are shaped by mood, circumstance, and reaction rather than intention. These words may feel harmless, but they are continuously forming patterns. Life responds not to what people want occasionally, but to what they consistently affirm through speech. When speech contradicts desire, speech wins. Aligned speech begins with inner agreement. If words are spoken without emotional agreement, they lack power. Saying everything is working out while feeling panic sends mixed signals. The subconscious responds to feeling, not vocabulary. Alignment occurs when words match inner state. When this happens, speech carries authority. Florence taught that authority is felt, not forced. Words spoken calmly, without emotional strain, carry more creative power than words spoken with desperation or excitement. Calmness signals certainty. Certainty signals alignment. Alignment activates law. This is why quiet declarations often produce stronger results than loud affirmation. Speech creates reality because it directs attention. Attention organizes perception. Perception shapes behavior. Behavior produces outcomes. This chain begins with words. The words someone uses determine what they notice, what they ignore, and how they interpret events. Interpretation feeds emotion. Emotion reinforces belief. Belief solidifies experience. Many people unknowingly speak against themselves. They describe problems repeatedly, analyze obstacles aloud, and rehearse fears in conversation. This rehearsal strengthens those conditions. The law does not care whether speech is labeled as venting or being realistic. It responds to repetition. Repetition creates familiarity. Familiarity creates expectation. Aligned speech does not deny challenges. It denies their permanence. There is a difference between acknowledging a temporary condition and declaring a fixed identity. Saying this is challenging right now allows movement. Saying this always happens to me locks the pattern. The latter creates a reality loop. Florence emphasized that words spoken after an event are just as important as words spoken before it. How someone interprets outcomes determines whether the pattern continues. Interpreting failure as proof of inadequacy strengthens limitation. Interpreting it as feedback preserves alignment. Speech after the fact either reinforces or dissolves the pattern. Speech also shapes identity. Statements that begin with "I am" carry particular weight. The subconscious treats these statements as identity-level commands. "I am unlucky," "I am bad with money," or "I am always behind" becomes self-fulfilling. Aligned speech replaces these with neutral or empowering identities that feel believable and calm. The tone of speech matters as much as content. Sarcastic positivity carries doubt. Forced enthusiasm carries strain. Aligned speech feels natural. It does not require convincing. It feels like stating a fact rather than making a request. This tone signals confidence to the subconscious. Florence taught that words spoken in emotional neutrality are especially powerful. Emotional neutrality indicates acceptance. Acceptance signals safety. When the subconscious feels safe, it allows change. Words spoken during calm states penetrate deeper than words spoken during emotional extremes. Speech also influences timing. Words that imply urgency create pressure. Pressure creates resistance. Resistance delays results. Words that imply inevitability create patience. Patience removes interference. Aligned speech trusts timing rather than trying to control it. Another aspect of aligned speech is consistency. Inconsistent speech sends conflicting instructions. Saying something positive once and then negating it repeatedly does not create alignment. Alignment requires repetition without contradiction. Over time, repeated aligned speech becomes internalized. Once internalized, it no longer feels like effort. Florence also addressed the habit of explaining too much. Over-explaining reinforces doubt. Justifying desire signals insecurity. Aligned speech does not need defense. It is simple and direct. This is unfolding in my favor is more powerful than long explanations about why it should. Speech directed at others also affects personal reality. Complaining about people reinforces powerlessness. Speaking blame reinforces victimhood. Aligned speech maintains personal authority regardless of external behavior. Authority stabilizes reality. Florence taught that speech spoken before sleep carries special influence. As the conscious mind relaxes, words bypass critical resistance and enter the subconscious directly. Speaking aligned words at night establishes expectations that shape the next day's experience. This is why bedtime speech often determines morning mood and outcomes. Another important factor is silence after aligned speech. Silence allows the word to settle. Repeating from anxiety weakens alignment. Trusting the word after it is spoken strengthens it. Silence is not emptiness, it is integration. Aligned speech also requires listening. Listening to one's habitual language reveals patterns. Awareness is the first step to change. Once patterns are seen, they lose unconscious power. Conscious choice replaces automatic reaction. Florence emphasized that the law does not require perfect speech. Occasional negative words do not destroy alignment. What matters is dominance. The dominant pattern of speech determines reality. Small shifts, practiced consistently, gradually change the dominant pattern. Speech also interacts with imagination. Words shape mental images. Mental images reinforce emotion. Emotion feeds belief. Belief creates experience. This loop can be directed intentionally through aligned speech. Speaking in images rather than abstractions strengthens effect. Another overlooked aspect is how people speak about time. Saying it's taking forever reinforces delay. Saying this is coming together maintains movement. Time-related speech influences patience and expectation. Expectation influences perception of progress. Florence warned against dramatic language. Drama amplifies emotion. Amplified emotion imprints deeply. Neutral language reduces emotional charge and allows smoother transitions. Calm speech stabilizes internal state, which stabilizes external conditions. Aligned speech is also compassionate. Harsh self-talk creates internal conflict. Conflict disrupts alignment. Gentle correction maintains authority without resistance. Florence taught that kindness toward oneself strengthens manifestation because it reduces internal opposition. Speech is also influenced by environment. Surrounding oneself with constant negativity makes alignment difficult. Florence encouraged conscious choice of conversation and media. What is heard repeatedly becomes part of internal dialogue. Internal dialogue becomes spoken word. Spoken word becomes reality. Another subtle point is humor. Humor can relieve tension, but self-deprecating humor reinforces limitation. The subconscious does not distinguish between jokes and commands. Repeated jokes become agreements. Aligned speech avoids reinforcing limitation even playfully. Florence also taught that speech creates momentum. Once aligned speech becomes habitual, momentum builds. Momentum makes manifestation easier because less effort is required to maintain alignment. Life begins to respond faster. Speech also governs self-trust. Speaking confidently builds internal credibility. When someone hears themselves speak with certainty repeatedly, the subconscious begins to accept authority. Authority strengthens alignment. Alignment strengthens results. Aligned speech does not mean constant talking. Sometimes restraint is alignment. Not reacting verbally to fear prevents reinforcement. Silence in moments of doubt protects alignment. Words spoken impulsively often undo progress. Florence emphasized that speech is always creating, whether intentionally or not. This awareness shifts responsibility inward. Instead of blaming circumstances, one examines language. Language becomes a tool rather than a habit. When speech aligns with belief, feeling, and expectation, It becomes a directive rather than a wish. Directives organize reality. Wishes express longing. Longing implies absence. Aligned speech assumes presence. Reality responds not to desire, but to instruction. Speech is the primary form of instruction. When instruction becomes consistent, reality reorganizes accordingly. Over time, aligned speech reshapes identity. Identity reshapes behavior. Behavior reshapes environment. Environment confirms identity. This feedback loop stabilizes new realities. Florence Scovel Shinn's insight was that life is responsive, not random. Speech is one of the most direct ways to communicate with that responsiveness. When speech is aligned, life answers clearly. Understanding that aligned speech creates reality removes the need for force. It replaces struggle with cooperation. Words become deliberate. Outcomes become predictable. Not because life is controlled, but because it is communicated with clearly. Once speech is aligned, reality no longer feels like something to fight. It feels like something that listens. Wealth, in Florence Scovel Shinn's teaching, is not governed by chance, luck, or external systems alone. It is governed by spiritual law. Spiritual law is not religious doctrine, nor is it superstition. It is a set of consistent principles that operate whether they are understood or not. Just as gravity works without belief, the spiritual law of wealth operates through consciousness, expectation, and alignment. The spiritual law of wealth begins with the understanding that supply is not created by effort but accessed through alignment. Effort can move things, but alignment determines what moves toward you. Many people exhaust themselves trying to create wealth through force, while others seem to receive it through ease. The difference is not morality or intelligence. It is alignment with law. Florence taught that wealth is not something you attract by wanting, it is something you allow by removing resistance. Resistance appears as fear, guilt, unworthiness, or the belief that money is limited. The beliefs are spiritual blocks, not practical ones. When they exist, wealth cannot remain even if it arrives temporarily. The spiritual law of wealth operates through consciousness first, form second. Consciousness is the inner agreement about what is normal and possible. If wealth does not feel normal internally, the law cannot sustain it externally. This is why sudden money often disappears. The consciousness was not prepared to hold it. Wealth responds to identity. Identity is the deepest agreement a person holds. If someone identifies as someone who struggles, the law supports that identity faithfully. If identity shifts to someone who expects provision, the law supports that instead. The law does not judge identity, it expresses it. Florence emphasized that money is neutral energy. It does not corrupt or purify. It amplifies what is already present. If someone fears money, money will feel threatening. If someone trusts money as a tool, money will feel supportive. The spiritual law responds to the relationship, not the object. Another key aspect of the spiritual law of wealth is circulation. Wealth must move to remain alive. Hoarding from fear blocks circulation. Reckless spending from insecurity also blocks circulation. Balanced flow signals trust. Trust signals alignment. Alignment allows expansion. Florence taught that gratitude is a direct activator of the spiritual law. Gratitude signals completion rather than lack. It communicates to consciousness that supply is present. This shifts internal posture from reaching to receiving. The law responds by increasing what is acknowledged. The spiritual law of wealth also requires non-attachment to struggle. Many people believe struggle is necessary to deserve wealth. This belief creates a spiritual contradiction. The law cannot deliver ease to a consciousness that believes ease is wrong. Releasing this belief opens the door to effortlessness. Wealth is also influenced by emotional consistency. Emotional volatility creates financial volatility. Calmness creates stability. The law responds to emotional tone more than intellectual belief. A calm expectation of wealth is more powerful than an excited desire for it. Florence explained that wealth does not respond to need. Need implies absence. The law reflects absence with more absence. Wealth responds to assumption. Assumption implies presence. Presence creates continuity. This is why speaking and thinking from sufficiency changes outcomes. Another principle of the spiritual law is authority. Authority comes from inner certainty. When someone speaks or acts as though wealth is natural, the law cooperates. When someone approaches wealth with hesitation or apology, the law reflects that insecurity. The law also responds to moral clarity, not in a moralistic sense, but in internal coherence. When desires conflict with values, resistance forms. Resistance slows manifestation. When values and desires align, the law moves smoothly. Florence taught that wealth often arrives through unexpected channels. The spiritual law does not follow logic, it follows alignment. Fixating on one method blocks others. Flexibility signals trust. Trust expands options. Another overlooked aspect is patience. Patience is not waiting, it is trust without anxiety. Anxiety disrupts alignment. Patience maintains it. The law responds faster to patience than to pressure. The spiritual law of wealth also governs timing. Wealth arrives when consciousness is ready to hold it. Readiness is not about skill alone. It is about emotional stability, self-worth, and trust. When readiness is present, timing accelerates. Florence emphasized that wealth is not separate from spirituality. Treating money as unspiritual creates division. Division creates resistance. Integration creates flow. When money is seen as part of the natural order, the law responds with ease. Another principle is responsibility. Responsibility is not blame. It is recognition of creative power. Recognizing responsibility restores authority. Authority allows alignment. Alignment allows wealth. The law also responds to joy. Joy signals abundance. Joy is not excitement, it is contentment. Contentment removes desperation. Desperation blocks flow. Joy opens it. Florence warned against resentment toward wealth or wealthy people. Resentment creates opposition. Opposition blocks reception. Blessing wealth wherever it appears aligns consciousness with supply. The spiritual law of wealth is precise but gentle. It does not punish mistakes, it reflects patterns. Patterns can be changed. Once changed, results change naturally. Understanding this law removes superstition from prosperity. Wealth becomes a consequence, not a chase. When consciousness aligns with the law, wealth expresses itself without force. The law does not require perfection. It responds to direction. Small, consistent alignment produces lasting wealth. When alignment stabilizes, wealth feels less dramatic and more normal. Ultimately, the spiritual law of wealth teaches that abundance is not earned through struggle but allowed through harmony. When harmony is present internally, wealth has no obstacle externally.